Good evening, you're watching No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Rahul Gandhi has created a stir with his tweet today where he has compared India to Sri Lanka. Putting out the tweet with this graphic, he said that distracting people won't change the facts. India looks a lot like Sri Lanka. You can see here that the graphics have unemployment data, petrol prices that are rising and communal violence indices. Sri Lanka, of course, is facing its worst ever economic crisis at the moment, where there is a shortage of food, fuel and even medicines. The anti-government protests there are primarily targeting the Rajapaksa family, which came into power riding a nationalist wave in 2019. And minority Muslims and Tamils found themselves at the receiving end of a communal campaign. Today, the same strongman, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Sri Lanka's president, is facing the anger of all communities as the economy struggles. So what's happening in India? Well, we're witnessing communal tensions too in some form or the other. Right now, we're in the middle of a Mandir Masjid Rao, which is squarely back in focus. And here too, the economy is facing headwinds. But is Rahul Gandhi accurate or alarmist in comparing India to Sri Lanka? Joining us on the program tonight, Pavan Verma, author and former diplomat, PKD Nambiar, supporter of the BJP, political analyst, Zainab Sikandar also joining us. She's also a columnist and writer. We'll also be joined by the Congress's spokesperson and another guest very shortly. But Zainab Sikandar, let me ask you first. Do you agree with Rahul Gandhi's comparison?
More so than agreeing, maybe BJP is, prone to calling Rahul Gandhi a person who exaggerates, but BJP is also adept at, hyperboles. They tend to sort of overplay the things they do and praise themselves more than they need to. Now, India and Sri Lanka maybe not similar in the problems they have. But yes, India is having problems and the indices may be similar, but the variables can be different. Like for example, India is having unemployment issues, India is having fuel issues, and India is having a minority problem where minorities are targeted. So, you have to have a lack of imagination to think that India and Sri Lanka can't be compared unless the same things are happening in both the countries. It's not true. We can always have different situations, but the indices are same. And that's what I think Rahul Gandhi is pointing at. BJP shouldn't be overconfident in always saying that we are doing well. It is good to learn from others' experiences. And this is where India needs to know that at least we are not going the right way economically. There is a problem. GDP is at an all-time low. Fuel prices are really high. Unemployment is a real problem in India. You look at factors in which India is doing badly, we have quite a few of them. But what are the headlines in India? What are the discussions in India? The Gyanvapi Mosque. We are discussing about halal meat. We are discussing about boycotts. I wish a halal meat ban boycott would have caused an increase in employment, but that isn't happening.
I think you're right. There are lots of broad points on which there are similarities, but I mean, structurally, fundamentally, our economies, for example, are very, very different. Sri Lanka's economy is so import dependent and it's facing a huge foreign exchange reserve crisis, which is at the heart of all this. But Pavan Verma joining us, and he wrote a terrific piece actually about this, saying that India isn't Sri Lanka, but it must draw lessons from Sri Lanka. Pavan Verma, that is the point that you made, that there are bigger lessons that India can learn from what's happening in Sri Lanka. I think the bottom line being that muscular nationalism the sort of communal politics can only take you so far. The fundamentals have to be strong.
Thank you, Nidhi. Essentially, I cannot mechanically conflate Sri Lanka with India. Sri Lanka is a small economy, an island economy, disproportionately dependent on one source for its economy, which is tourism. And it has also suffered from poor institutions of economic management. India is a continental economy. The fundamentals are under stress, but still strong. We have unacceptable levels of unemployment. Inflation is at a 15-month high, and at the consumer price level at a 15-year high and an 8-year high. The dollar is sliding, demand is not picking up, productivity is sluggish, the common man is facing problems. But that being said, there are fundamental differences between Sri Lanka and India on the economic front. What worries me is the takeaway from Sri Lanka on lessons other than economic. Look at Sri Lanka. It's a multi-religious, plural society. If there are 70% of the Sinilas, there are 18% Tamils and 9% Muslims. What Sri Lanka has been seeing is a definitive trend towards Sinhala majoritarianism, which also brought Gotabaya Rajapaksa to power. He led Sri Lankan armed forces in quelling the Tamil rebellion, and in 2009 was victorious with many allegations of human rights violations, but on that basis, backed by a Sinhala majoritarianism, he came to power. Now since then, Sri Lanka has a leader who has an absolute majority, both when he fought for president and when his party fought for the parliamentary elections. And in the assurance of the backing of the majority community, I'm afraid the hubris has resulted in many economic errors which have been carried out whimsically. For instance,
so there you see the parallels.
Said,
that's where you see the parallels with India.
Yeah,
like for example,
if I could just complete, I'll take a minute more. I'll just take a minute more. For instance, he said there should be a huge tax cut for a revenue-starved island. Then he overnight banned the import of fertilizers, very akin to the decision on demonetization.
Yeah, deja vu.
Which he said the whole country will now practice organic farming. A huge hit for the farming sector. The rubber and tea plantations suffered the most. So there are these parallels where you have a leader with popular support through populism and majoritarian
politics. Absolutely. I just take this to Mr. Nambiar.
Who acts in that manner.
Right. Mr. Nambiar, how would you sort of respond to that? Actually, what Mr. Pavan Verma is saying is that there are fundamental differences, but there are lessons that we can learn from what is happening in Sri Lanka. At the very least, would you say that that is fair?
Not at all. In fact, it's very unfair even comparing India, a large economy of 140 crore people with a very, very strong democracy, which have got a very strong cooperative federalism, and a $3 billion trillion economy you are comparing with an $8 billion economy. Secondly, as Pavanji said, that it is India is a very diverse economy, whereas Sri Lanka was only dependent upon one particular economy, that was tourism. So I think comparing an oranges and apple is something like a very childish argument, which is not expected out of a senior leader like. If forget about the Congress, at least he has been an MP for several years. I think it is not expected out of him. Secondly, if he wished that India should also go to that line of Sri Lanka, then only God can help him and as well as the Congress. Now coming to some of the fundamental aspect of it. India's foreign currency reserve as on today, maybe it may be here and there more than $600 billion. Our agricultural stockpile can serve all of us even in the worst time of the COVID. We have seen that not even a single case we have heard from anywhere that the people were under poverty. They were not being served the food at their own home without even free rations were delivered. We are talking about, even though we are 80% of our fuel is supposed to be imported, but we are, have you seen a single place where in a petrol pump where you went and you would not be able to get a petrol or a diesel or for that matter a CNG or anything else? So where is this
apples and oranges
comparison? Secondly, and not only that, FDI, for an example, this is one of the very fancy word for all the Congress spokesperson generally. FDIs are taking away the money, the stock exchanges are coming down, all the money is being put into the US economy and so on and so forth. Imagine 2.5%, and India's FDI is the only FDI in the world which has got such a global footprint. Tell me one economy in the world, whether it is China, whether it is US or in Canada or a UK, any of the economy of which we compare of the top 5. Sri Lanka is our neighbor.
Look, I get your point. That I think Pawan Verma was saying the same thing, that economically you can't compare the two countries at all. But I think the bigger point, and Gurdeep Sapal, is that the point Rahul Gandhi was trying to make about majoritarian politics, the limits to that, and how far it can take a country. Is that, although the opposition clearly, I mean the BJP clearly feels that it was a childish and unfair sort of comparison to make, as they put it. Mr. Sapal.
First of all, about this childish comparison, I don't think Rahul Gandhi said anything like what Narendra Modi said during Kerala election, that Kerala is worse than Somalia, or something that he said in China or Beijing, that Indians were born ashamed to be born in India before 2014. He said nothing like that. So let us keep that argument aside. What Rahul Gandhi essentially said was that there is crisis in India. He did not say that India will become like Sri Lanka. He said that diversions will not hide the facts. And what are the facts today? Today, the reality is that the unemployment is at 45 years high. This is a reality. This is a reality that petrol, diesel prices are at all-time high. There's no two view about it. So this is what Rahul Gandhi tried to draw the attention of nation to this. And he is saying that unless you talk about this, you are not going to solve this problem. Just now I was hearing a long lecture on FDI and other things. Let us not forget that in last 8 months, our FDI reserves have fallen by some $50 billion. If you are sitting on a huge FDI pile, that is because of the policies, that economic policies that UPA put in 10 years of its reign.
But Mr. Sapal, at the same time, we're also not at that, our economy, yes, it's facing a lot of issues. All the issues you laid out are true. But are we at that inflection point like Sri Lanka is, where we're running out of food, fuel and medicine? No. That's not likely to happen.
Please reread the Rahul Gandhi's tweet. He never said that. He said there is a crisis of employment, there is a crisis of price rise, there is an economic crisis, and country is being diverted on divisive issues. That is what he is drawing attention to. He has not said that we are becoming like Sri Lanka. Issue is the government policies are like the policies of Sri Lankan government, and this is why we are doing so badly in economy. This is why we are doing so badly in every indicator. I would just like to mention one point, because this FDI, huge pile of FDI was mentioned in your show. And BJP makes a huge show of that they have increased the FDI by 65% in last 8 years. They forget that in Manmohan Singh's government, Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, FDI grew by 1,130%. This is what the legacy was given to BJP government, and this is what BJP government is blowing away.
Okay, let me get Rajat Sethi into this, because Rajat Sethi, again I come to the bigger point that I think that was trying to be made here. The limits to majoritarian politics. Are we right now distracted with all this other drama around, mosque, temple, whereas the real issues are kind of, they're not getting the attention that they should, such as inflation, which is very real, it's hurting everybody, and it's there. Rajat Sethi.
It's great to be back on your show, Nidhi. First thing is that I don't know how you are deducing where is the deduction coming in that nobody is focusing on inflation. I don't know where that data point you're getting from. That's number one. Number two, you are debating an issue about something what Rahul Gandhi said. Had a college graduate would come out with such an argument, you would at least intellectually engage with that person and try and explain. Over here on a one axis, he just draws a free-flowing chart with no numbers, no y-axis drawn. Just trying to have a very simplistic, grotesque simplicity, which he's trying to bring to his argument, is problematic. Now today, America is running out of baby products. They're running out of baby food. Does it mean that America has majoritarianism and it is because of this reason that America is suffering and it is going to become Somalia? This kind of these kind of bizarre argumentation need to stop. Looking at our own nation in such pejorative ways need to stop. We need to look at the bigger picture. You need to go back to data points. Majoritarianism, I'll tell you majoritarianism. When Congress was in power, do you even remember the number of riots, communal riots, by the way, that used to happen? I need not reiterate what happened in Muzaffarnagar or what happened in Assam, where hundreds and hundreds of people used to get killed for one event or the other. Where are you? Which event, which communal riot event are you seeing nowadays? See, societal problems are there in this country.
Do you necessarily need a riot for there to be a majority? I mean, for majoritarianism to exist?
There has to be a manifestation, right? See, society has fault lines. Indian society is undergoing through a churning. That is true. All right, which doesn't necessarily mean that you put a tag to. No, it's certainly a churning. There is a civilizational churning, and I strongly believe in that churning. Why not? Why not when these lands are being reclaimed, wherein, for a very long time, our civilization has largely been a wounded civilization which has never seen closure. Those issues have to be resolved. We are a strong economy. We are a confident nation. We are a young nation. We are looking up to the future, and we don't want to stare back into and be shy about our.
Zainab, do you want to come in on this as a confident nation that's digging up its past, and I don't know how far it's going to go back to dig into that, but. Was Rahul Gandhi's comparison oversimplistic? Is what Rajat Sethi is trying to say.
Maybe we need to open all the 20 doors of Taj Mahal to dig into the reality, and then the churning will happen, and the manthan will happen, and the reality of India will come out. I think we need to just get out of this way of talking. And Rajat was just speaking about manifestation. There has been enough manifestation that has happened in Jahangirpuri and Madhya Pradesh recently. So let's not talk about, communal violence actually manifesting. Whichever side is wrong, the investigation will happen. But yes, if you're denying that India is seeing a majoritarian trend, then I must say you're living under a rock, because India is only seeing that. We are only talking about Azan and Hanuman Chalisa. These are our headlines, and Sri Lanka also had that problem. But based on majoritarian politics, I'm not talking about economy. I'm not an expert in economy, but we have to draw parallels, like Mr. Verma just said. Parallels are very similar. We can learn from it. You want to call it alarmist? Go ahead. I think it's a bit humble if a government learns from mistakes of other countries and tries not to repeat it. And the truth is, the main 4 things that Sri Lanka went wrong on, like tax cuts, like their tourism going bust because of COVID, and also the import of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers was stopped. Okay, all these, if you see in Sri Lanka, were knee-jerk economic decisions. Has India taken knee-jerk economic decisions? Of course. If you look at demonetization, it was a knee-jerk decision. If you see the hasty rollout of GST, it was a knee-jerk decision. If you see even policy making, farm laws, they were knee-jerk decisions. They were ill-timed, ill-thought-out policies. And India needs to learn from that. Rahul Gandhi can draw parallels. All I am saying as a political commentator, that the Indian government needs to stop being so overconfident. This entire jingoism that we are sort of looking at, and that needs to stop.
That political hubris I think Mr. Pawan Verma made a reference to. Mr. Nambiar, do you want to address that point? The danger of that hubris, of thinking that because you have the brute majority, that nothing can go wrong, that the people are always with you.
Nidhi, I always feel that I often hear this statement that brute majoritarianism. Where is this? Is Narendra Modi or Amit Shah or a JP Nadda or a BJP went and bought this majoritism in their favor? It is the people of India who have elected them one after another, election after election. If the people then criticize that and make that as a statement of majoritarianism, I can only say that they don't believe in democracy. If the people who believe in democracy should not be even uttering that word. Now coming back to the real topic, where is the question of comparison coming? Sri Lanka is our neighbor. Sri Lanka is our neighbor who has been given almost $2 billion worth of assistance by one country, that is India. China was trying to make Sri Lanka as a colony by putting up this FDI, this quote unquote. And where is that money gone? Nobody knows. So what is that what we wanted to learn from Sri Lanka, that they have used that money for one particular family, or for that they have wasted that money somewhere, or they have built infrastructures which were not really needed for the people? Is that what Rahul Gandhi wants us to go and learn? Is that what we wanted to know learn from that there is no fuel in that particular country and the neighbor or the food is not there, the wheat and the rice is being given or the medicines are being going from India? Why don't Rahul Gandhi and the Rahul Gandhi gang understands and appreciate that there is a country which is helping the neighbor in their hour of the need? And
Okay,
let's talk about now the facts.
Mr. Verma wants to
I'll
come
tell
in.
you one more thing,
Yeah.
very quickly. There is a unemployment data everybody is being talking about. Let's talk on the real fact. When was the last pandemic happened in this country? Is it just 45 years back or anything more than 100 years back? We are talking about an unemployment after a COVID situation which has completely demolished the overall economy across the world. And now I will tell you the exact
Mr.
figure.
Nambiar, the economy was facing headwinds even before the pandemic. The pandemic certainly complicated things, and inflation now has been in double digits for 13 straight months. It can't even be attributed only to the Russia-Ukraine war. But one second, Mr. Verma wanted to come in. Yes, Pavan Verma.
No, Nidhi, I have already said that to automatically compare the Sri Lankan economy with that of India is, I believe, not a model that is probably scalable. But we must see what is it that has led Sri Lanka to its current crisis. Even if it's an island economy, it's 20 million people. They could have managed it better. What has happened in Sri Lanka has very ominous resonances with what is unfolding in India, although the scales of the economy are different. I was given the argument that if somebody is elected, in that sense, the person is infallible. But Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected by a complete majority, both him and his party. If he has failed, we have to ask. And the basic lesson to draw is, countries which are not at peace with themselves internally can never really become stable foundations for economic prosperity and development. I agree. There is a churning. Societies keep changing. We have to see whether in the process we are unleashing forces which are going beyond the churn to create a turmoil. We have to see whether India, where there are pressing problems of our own, will only discuss issues which are about religious division. These are issues we need to learn from Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka, in its last 2 years since 2019, 3 years, was only focused largely with an all-powerful leader elected on majoritarian support democratically.
Yes, with a very targeted campaign against minorities, by the way. With a very targeted campaign against minorities.
With an internal tussle between Sinhala majoritarianism and the fact that Sri Lanka is actually a multi-religious and plural country. It's been devastated by a civil war.
Rajat Sethi,
it's time to heal the wound.
Is that not
it's
a lesson, a basic warning that we can heed? Is that unreasonable, given the turmoil or the civilizational churning, as you called it at the moment, that we need to be mindful that if this can happen in Sri Lanka, where Mr. Rajapaksa was a celebrated leader with a great majority a couple of years ago, look at the protests today. They've brought the majority and the minority together.
Nidhi, let me respond to Pavanji as well. There is a difference between correlation and causation. Please understand, do not break this complexity of what happened in Sri Lanka into very simplistic terms. There might be a correlation between Rajapaksa's pursuing some kind of a politics and what happened in Sri Lanka, but it does not draw a causal link between the two. IMF deals with nations' economies falling apart every year, year over year. Turkey was in bad shape just prior to pandemic. Its currency was absolutely all over the place. It was falling by the day. They couldn't control the inflation, was 30%. And Turkey, by the way, used to be considered as one of the burgeoning emerging economies. Look at Argentina, look at Brazil. Please understand, for IMF and for the world observers, economists, countries and their economies faltering for some bad economic decisions is a routine exercise. One or the other nation goes through it. The problem in this entire program right now in NDTV is that they are confusing between what is a simple correlation and what a causation is. Indian economy is robust. Indian politics is even more robust. Therefore, any parallels that you are drawing is absolutely wrong, and it does not merit even a simplistic discussion. This is my simple point that I'm trying to explain.
We've had to end this simplistic discussion at the moment because we're out of time. I wish one could, share the optimism that you have that everything is all hunky-dory here. It's not. I agree that perhaps a comparison with Sri Lanka is too simplistic, but there are certain lessons, certainly, that one can draw from what's happened there to ensure that we don't go down that path either. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us. Thank you.